All right, so today we have Steve Yegge. He is a evangelist at Sourcegraph, which you can find at sourcegraph.com. Taglines are industrializing software development with AI agents. But today we're here to talk about some of Steve's recent writings in the area of AI assisted coding and AI assisted software development. So, Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Why, thank you for having me.
So let's start with one of your recent posts, which is around a term that you coined, CHOP, CHOP, which stands for Chat Oriented Programming. So let's start by having you explain to listeners what you mean by chat oriented programming, and crucially, how does it change the role of a traditional software developer?
Okay, that's a great place to start. So for starters, chat-oriented programming is a term that I coined, like almost a year ago, and it was a little ahead of its time. Dr. Andre Karpathy, co-founder of OpenAI, has come up with a much more accessible packaging for it. Yeah, and so
Vibe coding.
vibe coding, that's right. And so, Gene Kim and I, my co-author on our book about this stuff, agonized over it, and then eventually decided that we're going to go with the flow. We're not going to try to go swim against the stream. So our book is called the Vibe Coding Handbook, and it's about chat oriented programming, but it's also about agent oriented programming, right? Agentic programming, which came faster than anybody expected. Yeah. And so yeah, to different, just to clarify, I mean, like, the funny thing about this situation is that what we're learning is that the industry has the widest distribution of sort of understanding of what's going on that we've ever seen in history. We've got people that are literally putting together PDFs and mailing them around saying this is why you should stop using AI and go back to old fashioned coding. We've got, cohorts of juniors or seniors or whoever, like, who are refusing to adopt AI inside of companies. We've got people spread out along this spectrum of what kind of modalities they're using, and you can almost place them like a historian. The last time they looked at AI by what they're using. If they're using code completions and they're measuring completion acceptance rate, then they're dinosaurs, right? I mean, they're laughably bad. And if they're using chat, then they're kind of caught up, but they haven't figured out that agents are just rocketing past that, right? So, so to kind of close off the whole chop versus vibe coding started off as, Karpathy was like, it's easy. Yeah, it's easy. That's what made it so accessible to everybody, right? And everybody kind of like didn't read his whole tweet, and then they sort of misinterpreted it to mean, oh gosh, the LLM is now ready to write all of my code for me, and I can just trust it and check it in and send it on its way. And that's led to all sorts of production incidents, and people saying no vibe coding at my company or no vibe coding while I'm on call, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just been this whole debate over whether you can turn your brain off. So to settle that debate once and for all, Google decided to adopt vibe coding, and Sergey Brin said, this is the way we're going to code from now on, because you can do it as a grown-up also, right? You can do it as an engineer. You don't have to turn your brain off. Vibe coding is just having the AI do your work for you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to turn your brain off and just like accept whatever it gives you. Yeah. The decision as to how close to pay attention to it is purely a function of the problem that you're working on, right? The domain. If you're doing a weekend prototype, then vibe code away, right? Don't even care how it's done. If you're doing a bunch of production prototyping of 20 different options at your company, right? Turn that brain right off. You don't care how they're implemented. You just want to like evaluate them. Yeah. But then when it comes time to like, harden it for production, then you can continue to vibe code. But what you do is you demand excellence of the LLM. You would demand that it brings it up to the quality standards that you would have as an engineer. And there you go. That's what Google does now officially. So that's vibe coding for you. Vibe coding is the new coding. It means using AI. If you're using an agent like Claude Code, or Aider.ai, Aider.chat, I mean, those things don't really change the picture very much. You still vibe code with them, and they still do your work for you, and you still have to decide how much to pay attention to it based on the problem.
So, to make it more concrete for our listeners, so I guess, Steve, there's the traditional AI assisted coding, like you said, the completions, right? So where your trust in the AI might be moderate. So vibe coding, it seems like that, the trust in AI is much higher, and the AI actually generates a majority of the code, and in many ways, the developer becomes a high level orchestrator or a strategic guide, right? So instead of actually coding or writing code line by line, is that how you would make that distinction?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Trust is a huge dimension, right? Trust is the number one thing that's keeping the industry from rocketing forward on adoption, right? It's the LLM produces hallucinations, and the outcomes aren't always great. With chat programming, right, which is really pretty taken off right now. I mean, chat programming, even though chat programming is right now being eclipsed dramatically and exponentially by agent programming, which we'll talk about in a bit. Chat programming is still kind of on the rise. And with chat programming, what you do is you get the LLM to do the work, but then you have to validate it yourself. Maybe with the LLM's help, maybe you'll be like, okay, let's write some tests. Oh, let's write some more tests. Let's run the tests. You're nudging it over and over again in a conversation back and forth, right? And this is, by the way, this is a problem that many senior engineers who have not adopted AI yet for their coding, the ones who are still clinging to their keyboards, they often don't try hard enough. That's the problem. They're told that the AI can do these great things, and so they sit down and they go, "All right, do a great thing for me," and they give it their hardest interview question, and it doesn't get it right, and they're like, "Well, this thing's dumb. I'm not going to use it. I can code better than this." This is a really, really, really common pattern, right? It's like, well, if your manager brought you an intern, and said, "Hey, here's a pair programmer who can help you pair program with them," you wouldn't give them your best interview question and then boot them to the curb if they fail it, right? That's dumb. But people aren't thinking about the tools, correctly yet. They're still kind of, I mean, maybe stuck in the old deterministic world or something, and they expect it to work right the first time. But they don't. They don't work right the first time, right? And it's not like if they got a 20% hallucination rate that it's like 1 out of 5 answers is wrong. That's an oversimplified way to look at it. It's more like, 5% of all the answers are going to be slightly wrong, and 50% will be very wrong, or whatever, right? And so you can't trust anything. You have to validate and verify what the LLM is doing. And this is the hurdle that people have to get over, right? It's really difficult for them. Is you're actually, like, you're no longer writing the code yourself. You're still accountable for it. You're still responsible for it. Your head will still roll if the code is bad. They can't blame the AI and fire it. That's just comical. Well, I see people on X blaming AI for stuff, and it's like, that's stupid, right? That's like blaming your compiler for a production outage. It's you that owns the code, right? But people are really struggling with this new role that they're getting into, which is that of you're a team lead, right? You're a tech lead. And this is even more true when you start using coding agents like Claude Code, right? You could have 3 or 5 of them running at once. One of them's working on your bug backlog grooming. One of them's working on coding a new feature. One of them's working on code reviews, whatever, right? You're massively more productive. But you're not a programmer anymore. And that's killing people. So, I mean, this is just, we're in one of those weird "who moved my cheese" moments in the industry. I mean, people are just like really confused and upset about this.
So in your mind, so for people to make this transition to the world of vibe coding and chop, so what are some of the core skill sets that they will need to kind of embrace? Uh, I guess prompt engineering, right? So
Okay, that's a great question. So for starters, I have a whole chapter on this in our book. Prompt engineering is, kind of like bandied about and misunderstood. Prompt engineering is a separate discipline from what we've been calling CHOP, or what's now called vibe coding. Prompt engineering you can think of as sort of static prompting. Prompts that are going to last a long ass time, so you got to test the hell out of them. A prompt, that makes the AI behave like a dating companion or something. You don't want it to go off the rails. You're embedding AI in your application for some specific purpose. That's what prompt engineering is for, right? To make sure that the thing doesn't go crazy when you upgrade the model, that kind of thing, right? Whereas chat programming and agent programming, that's dynamic. That's where you're creating throwaway prompts over and over again to nudge it in the right direction. And you're not really prompt engineering for the most part. Now, there may be pieces of prompts that you reuse over and over again for a project or for your team or even for your org. And coding assistants can help you like sort of organize those and get them in, when it's conversation time. But by and large, they're very different disciplines. And, I think engineers should know all of them. I mean, truly, you asked what skills. I mean, gosh, people ask me this all the time, and I haven't really had a good answer for them until recently. And now with the O'Reilly AI Engineering book by Chip Quinn, there's your answer. Okay, that is the new engineering job. All engineers have to know the contents of that 850-page book, inside and out, forward and back, upside down. Okay. You need to go get the book and read it and learn it. This is all stuff that I had to learn myself by like reading papers and stuff. It was like painful in 2023 and 2024. And I really wish that I'd had a book like that to guide me. But that is the skills that you need to put AI in applications. Yeah. And it's very likely that you're going to be working on something that you're going to be putting AI into it that's going to last a long time. Even if you're not doing product development, even if you're just building agents that are doing pieces of your CI/CD workflow, they still have to work for months or years at a time without like heavy maintenance. And so that's prompt engineering, right? So get the book and learn the stuff, okay? Because it's a lot more than just prompt engineering you got to learn. So,
or get the book and put it into a RAG system and start interrogating the book.
yeah, actually dump the book into Claude and have it summarize, and then start picking it apart, right? Leverage AI to learn faster, right? So that's number one, right? Is learn AI engineering. That's it. You got to do it. And if you need to make room in your brain for that, then just throw out everything you knew about programming language syntax, because that doesn't matter anymore. And that's coming from somebody who studied it for my entire life. So, I'm kind of sad to see it go, but also, let's be realistic. The LLMs are going to be writing all of the code here now. They already are for most people, or not for most people, but for a lot of people, enough people that we can tell that that's the future. So anyway, moving on, you got me so excited with this question. Moving on with skills, okay, AI engineer is one. Vibe coding is another one. Okay, freaking learn it. Just don't push back on it. Don't write a PDF on how we shouldn't be doing that. Learn how it works. Learn how to push it. Learn how to master it. Right? You got to it's like riding a motorcycle or something. Right? You got to you might fall off the first couple of times. For a dirt bike. And that's kind of the state of things right now. You get Claude Code, that thing doesn't even run in an IDE. It runs in a terminal. Like it looks like 1970s, it's like you've been walking your whole life, and somebody gives you a camel, and you're like, wow, you're trying to tell your friends how awesome this camel is. But also, it spits and it bites you and it's ornery and you have to feed it and it's kind of stinky. And they're like, have all the free camels you want. And you're just like, man, one camel's enough for me, right? The form factor is just terrible right now, right? We need to upgrade to, saddled horses and then, chariots and the rest and work our way up. And it's not palatable to developers today, the form factor. But if you try it and you use it and you see how powerful they are compared to chat coding, which is also incredibly powerful, right? So chat coding is 5 times as powerful, give or take, as manual traditional coding. Once you know how to ride that dirt bike I'm talking about, all right? And agentic coding, you're going to be shocked, is easily 5 times as fast as chat coding. Because what happens is the agent does all the stuff that you used to have to tell it to do. In a loop, the coding agent, okay, and I'm saying this even though it's going to be completely obvious to you all in 3 or 4 months, but right now it may be new to you, okay, if you're listening to this. These coding agents have a loop. They're very persistent, okay? They're designed to basically burn money to solve your problem. Brute force it, all right? It's crazy. What you'll do is you'll say, all right, here's a JIRA ticket, fix it for me, okay? And the first thing it will do is be like, okay, I need to get to that JIRA ticket. Okay, so it's going to look around to see how it can get to it. Can it browse the web? Can it use a command line tool? Can it use a REST protocol? It may even write a throwaway program for itself just to examine the contents of the ticket. And then once it's got and it'll interrogate you if it can't get it. It'll be like, hey, you need to give me access, right? Once it's got the ticket, the agent will evaluate your code base. How? By using the same tools that you do, grep and CD and ls and just sniffing around. and it'll show you what it's doing. You can interrupt it at any time and change its direction. And then it'll come up with an execution plan, and it'll be like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to fix this bug, and then we're going to write these tests, and then we're going to run these tests, and we're going to update the build system, and then we're going to update the documentation. And by the way, do you want me to git commit this for you? And you're just like, whoa, slow down. I got to look at this, right? It's nuts what they're doing. Okay, we all knew this was coming. Come on, we all knew this was coming. Nobody expected it to come in, early March 2025. We all thought it was next year. And so this has just thrown a complete wrench into everybody's planning. And I'll talk about the financial implications in a little bit. But
So Steve, the tools you're describing, there's the UX of the tool, right? So whatever it is, the agents, the terminal, whatever, and then there's the underlying models, right? So
yeah,
the foundation models, LLMs. So my impression is that the different LLMs are, converging in capability. So some are better than others a little bit, but they're all getting proficient in software engineering coding, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that programming and software engineering lends itself really to uh, AI and models, because you can validate, you can use reinforcement learning to make these models better, right? So, in your experience, when you work in vibe coding, are you using different models? Are you trying different models at once, or you decide, okay, for this project, I'm just going to stick with Claude?
yeah, it's a great question. Okay, short answer is yeah, I use different models, right? I mean, I have Gemini, and I have ChatGPT, and the reason is that models, they actually aren't all equal, right? And often getting a second set of eyes on something is a great way to validate or verify, especially if you're working in a domain that you're not real sure about. Like if you're having it write code for you in a language that you're not super familiar with, which is I think going to happen to us all increasingly as time goes forward.
Yeah.
You might want to like look at it and be like, okay, I believe you, but I don't really believe you yet, so I'm going to go ask Gemini what it thinks. And then we found that they're subject to the multiple witness effect. They can bias each other. I told Claude once that Gemini told me something, and it's like, oh, and it changed its answer. And then I'm like, you just changed your answer because I told you Gemini told you that, right? And it's like, yeah, I was actually right the first time. And I'm finally like, how can I trust you, Claude? And it's like, you can't. So yeah, having the extra models is a great way to, sort of like, right, get a second opinion, just like a doctor. With that said, Claude is the best at coding. And at first we were all kind of confused by this because they did seem to be converging, right? The models. But for some reason, there's an intangible going on here, right? Where Claude is better at coding, even though the benchmarks aren't really reflecting it. And it actually gives me like it makes me want to give more credence to Sam Altman's assertion that ChatGPT 4.5 is emotionally intelligent, right? I mean, I read the short story and I thought it was amazing, and the metafictional one that he posted, and now I'm inclined to believe that it actually might be, and it's something that can't actually be reflected in the benchmarks yet, but the model is actually better at that than maybe Claude, right? Or maybe some of the other models. So they all seem to be sort of like, getting their specializations. But with that said, okay, like there's a commoditization going on here that's really important to kind of be aware of, right? Which is they're all getting better, and at some point they're going to be all good enough that it doesn't really matter which one you're using. We're not there yet by a long shot, but the problem is if the agents are brute forcing the problem by throwing tokens at it, which means they try something, and if the LLM hallucinates, they try again and they try again until the test passes, right? Until they get it right. And so they don't need a fancy model for that. They might spend more money like on a cheaper model because they have more iterations, but then it might be a cheaper model. So they might maybe spend up less money. So it's really interesting, right? To see where this is gonna pan out. Models may not wind up mattering very much in a year, but today, to developers, they matter a lot.
So one of the things you write about, Steve, is one way to think about these big software projects is they're like a graph, right? So a task graph,
Yeah.
and then the LLMs are increasingly great at handling the leaf nodes of this graph, right? So the little subtasks. So where are we in terms of an LLM actually handling context across a big task graph? And vibe coding to
Yeah,
the fullest.
yeah. It ain't good right now. Okay, it's not good. I mean, like right now, the world is missing MCP servers for everything. So Anthropic's Model Context Protocol is the new HTTP. It's the future. It's how every intellectual property asset at every company is going to get wired together with AI so that AI can help you with it. And if you don't know what MCP is, you should go read about it right now and start writing your own MCP servers. Yeah. So, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Can you remind me what the question was? Because I
Oh,
think.
so how good are these models at this point in terms
Oh,
of
right.
tackling these bigger projects, right? So
Yeah.
these bigger graphs of
Gotcha,
projects,
gotcha. So
context, handling context. Yeah.
without MCP, they have no visibility, and so they're missing context. So you have to go and fetch it manually, which sucks, but that's kind of the game right now. And over time, they're going to get better and better at it. But today it's really early days, and the thing is, this really confuses people a lot because you'll see people using Oh,
So
go ahead.
Steve, just to clarify, so right now, what I'm getting from the picture you're describing is you have to hook up all of these kind of connections manually.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, look, it can read your Git repo maybe, but I mean, you one at a time. What about your databases? What about your logs? What about your documentation systems? What about your this and that? You're probably going to want the AI to have access to all of that at some point, right? At some point in your workflow, and it's invisible. So this is a RAG problem, right? It's effectively a RAG problem. You're all RAG shops now. If you want AI to help you, you have to show it your stuff. That's fundamentally what this comes down to. And MCP is a protocol for allowing you very easily, just using some natural language, to sort of tell it, this is how you get to this data, right? And so, yeah, they're not good. And the problem is that people are misreading it in both directions. They're either saying that it's not powerful enough, or they're thinking it's too powerful, and then they're walking away from it because they're disappointed, right? And so it's like, but you have to think about it like this, okay? We're all digging through a giant mountain. That's our project, right? It's labor, right? And we're all using shovels, and like completions was like an electric shovel, and chat was like, like a digger machine, you know what I mean, like a backhoe. And now with coding agents, you've got yourself a full-on tunnel boring machine. Have you seen those big giant ones? They're as long as a bus, and they're 50 feet wide. That's what Claude Code kind of is. It's a tunnel borer. You're still boring through the mountain. It is not going to get through the mountain in a day. It's not going to bore through the English Channel in a day. It's faster, but it's also, it's something you have to, it'll get stuck. Have you ever seen a tunnel boring machine get stuck?
Yeah.
One got stuck in Seattle for months, right? They can get stuck and you have to get them back on track. You have to point them in the right direction. It's not a panacea. And people are thinking that it is. So you have to come at it with the right eyes, the right mindset. You have to come in and say, look, the stuff is not good today, but if you work with it, you will find that you are more productive, and you will see very clearly what needs to change in order for it to be good, right? And we're not very far away.
So obviously, so there's the software development piece, right? So and then, but there's testing, QA, there's security. So I imagine. So obviously, one of the pushbacks I'm sure you're aware of, Steve, is these things can introduce bugs or security vulnerabilities and things like this, right? So you still need to make sure that you take care of those. But I imagine there's also AI on those aspects, right? So you can imagine, I don't know, the equivalent of penetration testing for software vulnerabilities before you deploy. And I don't know, to what extent are you following developments in these other areas?
I keep an eye on it, right? It's AI all the way down. Everything's going to be AI before long, which takes us back to your earlier question about skills, right? The next set of skills that developers are going to need to hone, are humanities skills, right? Humanities is back in fashion. You need to learn how to communicate and coordinate and, influence people and think logically and break down tasks and all these things, right? That you learn not in engineering degrees, but in humanities degrees. And it's going to be important because we're all going to be running around managing agents, and the agents will be doing security scans, and the agents will be doing, legacy code migrations and on all of that stuff, right? And our job now is we're the shepherds of these things.
And you also wrote to that end, you wrote an interesting post about career development, right? So what is career development in the age of vibe coding and AI assisted software development? But I even take it a step before that, Steve, which is basically what is computer science degrees in this age, right? So who would want to sit in a class now and have a take home coding assignment and sit through 4 years of lectures, right? So when every week the world is moving fast. So there's the actual, should I get a degree? And then once I have the degree, how do I progress in my career?
I mean, you're asking one of the hardest questions in the world right now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like it's existentially important to all of my friends who have kids that just graduated with computer science degrees. It's a tough question, but like let me just remind everybody that when assembly language went away, I mean I started my career in assembly language, and when IDEs showed up, man, people freaked out. They were like, we're all turning into babies, little screaming babies that don't know how to code anymore, just because we were using if statements instead of jumps. And there's a lot of there's a lot of pearl clutching over the whole thing, and what happened was software jobs actually went up. The job changed dramatically, especially in 3D graphics. Imagine how different 3D graphics was in the 80s and 90s, where you're rendering polygons yourself, versus today where you're like building games and custom physics and all that stuff. That's what's happening with programming as well. We're all going to become amazingly more like sort of capable of building things. And so don't worry so much about. I mean, but it's all computer science. It hasn't changed that much. The difference is you just moved up the abstraction ladder so that you're not so worried about the assembly language and now the high level languages anymore. You're more worried about architecture and algorithms and network topologies and things that are going to matter that the LM can help you with, but ultimately you need to understand, or else you're just flying blind as an engineer. And so they're going to swap out a couple courses, right? They might make programming languages course optional or a side course, and then they'll add a course for AI engineering. But fundamentally I think the degree is pretty similar now still.
So you've hinted at the state of agents for programming and software development, right? So how determined these agents can be, at least for narrow tasks, right? Uh, so where do you think we'll be with agents 6 to 12 months as far as
Okay.
software development?
uh, all right, well, buckle up, I'll tell you my answer. It's a hot take. I got a blog post coming about this too, but you guys can get the scoop. All right. And by the way, credit to my boss, Quinn Slack, CEO of Sourcegraph, for most of these ideas that I'm about to share with you. So 6 months, 6 to 9 months. Yeah. So first of all, I've come to understand that there are count them, six overlapping waves of AI modality that are all active right now. Okay, well, actually, one of them hasn't started yet, but the other five are active. And I'll tell you what they are. They're traditional programming, which is going down, and it'll be dead by 2027-ish. And then there was completions, which was a little bit of a boost. It was nice. And that lasted through 2023. And then 2024 was kind of the year of chat programming, and that was a very big boost of about 5x. That wave, remember, these waves are overlapping, and they are also accelerating exponentially. So each wave is coming exponentially faster than the previous wave, and it's growing faster than the previous wave, which causes these strange effects. Because there's this weird tri-state going on where 80% of the industry does not know about vibe coding yet. They literally don't know. They still thinking about completions or whatever. They still think AI is going away, except for Silicon Valley, which is in a bubble, right? And then there's like the vibe coding, virality, which is, just taking over the world, it feels like, right? But that's associated with chat programming, which is actually tanking because agents are the new way to program. And so there's three different like communities going on here, right? The sort of Luddites, and then the chat programmers, and then the brand new, bleeding edge agent folks, right? So where does this all take us in 6 months? Well, If you sit down with a coding agent, which I imagine most of you have not yet, but I would strongly encourage that you do, go get Ada Chat or Claude Code and open your wallet up and play with it for a few hours because they're expensive. Remember, I told you they're brute forcing the problem by burning tokens. Okay. Once you play with it, you'll realize that you really want to run 2 of them at once because while it's working, you're not, right? And so that frees you up to use another. And so now you start getting greedy. You're greedy. You're like, oh, nah, I could run 5 of these things and go 5 times faster. And turns out because they're camels, you can't really manage 5 of them at once yet, right? They're really new. But I managed to run 2 of them for a whole weekend. And that gave me a glimpse of the future that was terrifying. All right. Because if you can run 2 of them, I mean, basically each agent is roughly as productive as I am if I could keep its queue full. Yeah. I mean, like if I can just, because it stops all the time, they're stopping all the time. And that's going to be the big challenge is to get them to work longer and longer independently without a human in the loop. Yeah. But as you're using them, you realize that they're about as productive as you are for $10 an hour. Okay. That's a pretty good bargain. And if you do, 5 of them at once, once the tools say 2 months from now, 2 months, have evolved to the point where you can have a dashboard that manages multiple of these agents at once, okay, helping you out with that sort of juggling. Now you're spending $50 an hour and you're 5 times as productive or whatever. Call it 3 times at first. It'll grow. It's already like a no-brainer that you need to be doing this, especially if you're at an enterprise, yeah? Because your competitors will if you don't, and then you're going to start falling behind like you fell off a bullet train. And so the problem with this, where it starts to get really uncomfortable, is most companies just finished up their yearly planning, their budget planning, and it's frozen for the year, for the fiscal year of 2025, which ends at the end of January next year. And right now, coding agents are taking off, costing $10 to $50 an hour. And that starts to add up to a non-trivial percentage of the engineer's salary, which wasn't budgeted for. But when you run the numbers, you're like, well, we have to let them do this. So where's the money going to come from? Yeah. And unfortunately, if you have deep pockets, your Google or Nintendo or whatever, you got a bunch of money in the bank, then sure, right? You can just pay to play. It's pay to play now, right? You can be more productive for more money. And if you can raise money or scrape money together, you're also in good shape. But if you don't have the operating capital to absorb this huge bump in token spend that's going to hit you like in weeks from now, then you're going to have to cut somewhere. Okay, or fall behind. It's your choice, right? And fucking lose. But if you cut, you run the numbers, there's only one department where it makes any sense to cut, and that's the one that's getting 5 times as productive, right? Cut 10% to cover the costs, and then win, except for everybody that got cut. So that's why I'm out there. That's why I'm out there shouting at the sky. Okay, that's what it feels like, because nobody, a lot of people are still fighting against this trend. I'm saying you better learn this stuff, or you're going to be the one. Okay, I've seen companies lay off 30% of their engineers because they wouldn't adopt AI. It's already happening.
So Steve, for our listeners that are hearing this and might be having their blood pressure start rising, right? So
yeah, I hope so.
So what? What's your advice to people to make sure that they're not part of the layoff? So in other words,
hold your head out.
Which goes back to the beginning of the conversation, right? So which is basically, what skills should I be sharpening? Because before there was a natural career progression, right? So I start out junior developer, I get mentored, and then maybe I go into a more architect kind of role, and then maybe a manager, and so on and so forth. So I'm assuming these companies the first place they'll look at is, let's cut all these junior developers. We don't need them, right? So, but if I'm one of these junior developers, how do I avoid that?
Okay, so that's what I thought a year ago, but now, like, what I'm seeing is more senior developers are struggling with this than junior developers, to be honest. Okay. Junior developers have figured this out because they're like, how the hell am I going to get a job? They've realized that AIs are now better mentors than any engineer they can find, because they're more patient, they're adaptable, they're right, they're tireless. And so the junior engineers these days have been like going to the AIs and going to an AI and saying, make me a great programmer, and just like pushing on that, right? They're buying the AI engineering book, right? The O'Reilly one. They're reading papers. They're transforming themselves just like I did over the last 2 years from an engineer who doesn't know anything about AI to the new engineer. And the ones who do that, they survive. They survive because the skills. I mean, like chatting with an LLM, a year ago there was practically no skill involved, but now it's getting quite nuanced and complicated. And there's a lot of jargon and a lot of terminology, and there's a lot of, mental shifts that you got to make. And if you're still dabbling, hell, I've talked to good friends of mine in the last week who's still like, oh, I just dabbled, dabbled with it, with coding assistants, right? With chat coding, or then you're it's going to be over for you. Like, just you're going to be like, what happened? Like, why am I working on a mushroom farm in Florida now? Because I couldn't find a job. And it's because you couldn't roll with the times. You have to evolve.
So there's actually kind of a funny disconnect here too, which is basically, if you look at the Y Combinator batch, most recent batch, right? So a lot of those startups now are generating, a vast majority of their code is generated using AI. And yet, when you go to Hacker News, which is also owned by Y Combinator, you post a thing on there on vibe coding. You look at the comments, you go, come on, man, this is bullshit. This stuff doesn't work. And
Yeah. And
so,
every time, yeah.
on the one hand, you have the companies that are actually, the startups actually realizing we got to use this stuff, but then the people in these sites that are so-called hackers are really kind of pushing back. Right? So.
Dude, it's like somebody just threw a boulder into our pond. Okay. I mean, it is just such chaos out there right now. And yeah, and those comment threads are reflective of it, right? There's denial. I mean, there's the people are heads in the sand like ostriches. I mean, it's wild, and it gives me a little bit of hope that our book isn't totally useless, right? Because think about it, man, we're writing a book, printed on dead trees, that's like supposed to last a year, and shit is changing every 2 weeks, and like every time we write something down, it changes, right? And so our book has like kind of gotten more and more abstract as we've tried to like address these comment threads in Hacker News and Reddit and so on, where people are like, flipping out because they don't believe any of it. So the book has like kind of gone almost up to the level of evangelization and like really basic descriptions of what's going on. And then I start feeling like the book is useless and it brings no value, and people are going to read it and go, what the hell is this? But then when I hear this, it reaffirms that, damn, we need this book. We need this book bad because it's craziness. I can't even there's been nothing like this in history. Okay. Things are changing so exponentially. People do not understand exponentials. And organizational leaders do not understand that the status quo from January, which seemed utterly stable, Cursor, Windsurf, we just got ourselves, 800 license, seats for GitHub Copilot, and that's not going to change for a year. Well, guess what? They're already dead. Okay, they're already dead. If you've used Claude Cursor, they are dead to you. Now they're all going to get. I mean, not Claude Cursor, Claude Code. Their cursor will get a Claude Cursor, so to speak, right? It'll get an agent, and so will Sourcegraph and everybody else in just a couple of weeks, right? I mean, you're going to see them, and they'll be a lot more usable than Claude Code, and the race is on. But wow. I mean, like, it is absolutely crazy the denial people are in, and it's it's human nature. I'm not blaming anybody. I mean, I feel sorry for all of you. I mean, like, I got thrown into this accidentally, and I might have been one of the Luddites if I had like not been paying as much attention. Yeah, I got, what I mean, kind of lucky. But you need to generate your own luck at this point, right? I mean, like, it's a free for all. You need to, if you're an engineer, or you want to be an engineer, or you want to stay an engineer, then go get the AI engineering book from O'Reilly. You memorize it, and then never write another line of code again.
Yeah. And in closing, as Steve alluded to, many of these services are not free, but they're relatively cheap in terms of bang for your buck, in terms of upskilling yourself and just becoming more productive. But I guess to close, Steve, are you aware of tools that for the people who are really kind of wanting to not even spend anything, are there tools that run on Olama that are more local that they can try?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that Aider.chat can use Llama. I could be wrong. I'm sure it does. It has multi models, and so that's a super cheap way for you to do this. And again, because it's brute force, it doesn't matter if your model is like a little bit less good at coding. It shouldn't matter, or if it does, then wait 2 months. That's how fast it's changing. So yeah, that's a nice cheap way. And if you've never tried this, honestly, if you have no idea what we're talking about and you're just like, oh, I better learn this, go try ChatGPT, right? Just sit down, Claude. Actually, Claude's better for coding, and just give it some programming problems and start tinkering with it, right? You're going to have to copy and paste context out of your code base and copy its answers back into your code base and stuff, but it's good practice, and it's a super low friction way to get started.
And in closing, everything that Steve said, I agree with, and it's actually might actually be worse because the foundation models, the people building the foundation models, they're highly interested in making sure their models get better and better at programming and software development, as I alluded to earlier, because it lends itself to it's a problem that you can validate and test and all of these things and so all these new tools around reinforcement learning to help these models develop better reasoning capabilities with less data, they're all, I mean, this domain is perfect for that. So the foundation models are going to get exponentially better at this moving forward. And with that, thank you, Steve.
Well, thank you for having me. This was awesome.